Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're approaching the 1 year mark of the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in Oregon. It's been a wide-ranging and deeply felt impact across many parts of our lives and society. Since March of 2020, the Employment Department has paid $7.7 billion to well over 500,000 people, covering 11.3 million weeks of benefits. The number of people seeking benefits in Oregon in 2020 alone greatly outshadowed the Great Recession, which was the longest recession since World War II up to that point. This is a staggering amount of need and a staggering amount of work. We're not nearly done with that work, but we have learned so much since this disaster began, even as other disasters were layered on top of it. The past year has had sudden and persisting impacts on workers and on businesses. We're still in a serious recession, yet we are seeing the economy recover in many areas. The Employment Department will continue providing an essential safety net of benefits for unemployed workers and also help people find new jobs and careers and help businesses rebound. The pandemic affected Oregonians in different ways. Communities of color, women, and younger Oregonians are bearing the brunt of the impact. The unemployment rate for women was higher than for men for much of 2020. While that gap has closed, it is not all good news. The unemployment rate only reflects people who remain in the labor force, are able and available to take a job if it's offered to them, and have actively sought a job in the last 4 weeks. So some of that decrease in the gap is due to women dropping out of the labor force. Looking at Oregon's employment to population ratio for 2020, a larger share of women either lost jobs or left the workforce altogether last year. Industries where women held more jobs were harder hit during the pandemic recession, and many have experienced ongoing or increasing caregiving responsibilities. We have recently been able to start digging into the demographics of people who filed pandemic unemployment assistance or PUA claims in Oregon, including getting some details of who filed claims by gender. Before the pandemic, women made up a little less than half of Oregon's labor force. Yet in 27 of Oregon's 36 counties, women accounted for the majority of PUA claims. They accounted for 7 out of 10 claims in Sherman County and 6 out of 10 in Harney, Morrow, Union, Umatilla, and Wallowa counties. We're reviewing and analyzing race and ethnicity data for PUA claims also, and hope this valuable information will inform not just the work the Employment Department does, but work that our partners in the workforce system do as well, and policymakers and others throughout the state. Our data shows that younger workers experienced the biggest increases and the highest rates of unemployment in 2020. While their unemployment rate is consistently the highest of all age groups, it was at a 20-year low before the COVID-19 onset. And while unemployment rose from 2019 to 2020 for all age groups, the jump was most pronounced for Oregonians ages 16 to 24. For what's considered the working age group, which is 25 to 54 years old, the unemployment rate roughly doubled in 2020 to 6.5%. We are still in a serious recession, but we're moving further into the recovery phase. The data we provide and the services to help businesses and workers recover will be more central as we move forward through this recovery. Even with the devastating unemployment impact of the pandemic in 2020, our WorkSource services helped more than 48,000 people find jobs last year. For more information and to dig deeper into the data, I encourage people to visit the Employment Department's research and data site, qualityinfo.org. It offers a wealth of information and easy to understand graphics, data by county, industry, and workforce trends, wages and income, and other useful economic information. Talking about the benefit programs that we are providing, we wanted to let you know about some switching of people from benefit programs to other benefit programs that we're required to do under the Federal Continued Assistance Act. We're working to make this process as seamless as possible for everybody receiving benefits. We're moving about 16,000 people who have been receiving extended benefits, or EB, to the PEUC, Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation Benefit Program. This is due to the federal government informing Oregon that we need to stop paying extended benefits because of the state's unemployment rate. People being switched from EB to PEUC do not need to do anything to be switched, and they should just keep claiming each week of benefits through the regular UI program as they have been. We're also moving some additional people who have been receiving PUA benefits to the PEUC program as required by the Continued Assistance Act. These people will need to start claiming their weekly benefits under the regular unemployment system, and they can do that by clicking on the regular UI weekly claim button on our online claim system. In some cases, people may experience a brief delay while we transition people, but it should be just a business day or two in receiving benefits. We're working to minimize any possible delays or disruptions as we make these transitions. People often want to know what is going on with their claim and are frustrated because they don't know where to turn to get that information. We encourage people to use the online claim system to check the status of their claim. As the claim moves through the process or from one program to another, the claim status is updated. This information can be accessed through the online claim system by going to unemployment.oregon.gov and clicking on Online Claim System under the Quick Links column. We continue to work with state legislators on several topics. There's potential legislation around unemployment benefits, overpayments and taxes, the workforce system, and some of the work that our research division does. One example of legislation under consideration is House Bill 3178, which is the result of the Employment Department's collaboration with Boley Labor Commissioner Val Hoyle to ensure that Senate Bill 1701, which Commissioner Hoyle initiated and was passed during the second special session of 2020, supports Oregon's most valuable workers. House Bill 3178 would temporarily allow people to receive unemployment benefits, even if they're earning more than their usual weekly benefit amount, as long as they're not working full-time. Their weekly benefits then start to be reduced if they earn more than $300 in the week. We'll continue to share more information about state and federal changes to how we serve the public. We've been notified about many scams and attempts to steal people's information over social media. We want to make sure that people seeking benefits stay away from accounts falsely claiming to be U.S. Department of Labor or Employment Department representatives. People should be wary of website addresses that do not end in .gov. Government agency emails or websites will end in .gov, like Oregon.gov, for example. If you see an address that says dol-gov.com, that could be a scam. Be cautious if somebody reaches out and for private messages that people may receive on Facebook or on other social media offering to help. Criminals are pretending to be government employees and direct messaging people. The best way to contact the Employment Department is through the Contact Us form. If you are getting contacts from people, check the profile of them carefully and know that the Employment Department will never ask for money in exchange for you to receive your benefits, and we will not ask you for your PIN. Be wary if somebody says that they work for the Employment Department or for the U.S. Department of Labor. If they share a link, make sure that it has a .gov at the end. If you believe that you've been the victim of fraud or you hear information about potential UI fraud or scammers, please report it to us as soon as possible. You can find more information, including the forms to report fraud, on our website. You can find that at unemployment.oregon.gov/unemployment-insurance-fraud-ID-theft, or by simply searching for fraud when you go to our website. Our next webinar is tomorrow, February 25th at 1 p.m., and we'll be talking about pandemic unemployment assistance, employment, self-employment verification requirements. Simultaneous interpretation for the webinar will be available in Spanish, Vietnamese, Russian, and Mandarin. To register for the webinar and to view all of our past ones, you can visit unemployment.oregon.gov/webinars. And I mentioned earlier that the Employment Department has paid $7.7 billion. That's between March 15th of 2020 and February 23rd of 2021. Last week alone, we paid about $141 million to 183,000 people. The benefits we've paid include about $626 million in PUA benefits to just under 100,000 people. We're closely watching Congress in their efforts to pass additional stimulus legislation. We understand that some people now may only have a few more weeks of benefits left before the programs from the Continued Assistance Act expire. I want to thank our employees for already beginning to lay the groundwork so we can implement any benefit program extensions or new programs that are passed by Congress as quickly as possible. We're committed to minimizing the disruption people are likely to see now that we're so near the expiration of many of the Continued Assistance Act programs. And with that, I'm happy to try to answer any questions people may have.
Now we're opening the lines to members of the media to ask questions. We will call on you in the order you RSVP'd. A reminder, if you are joining us by phone, be sure to hit *6 to unmute yourself. If you don't get your question answered, please email oed_communications@oregon.gov. So the first question is Mike Rogaway with the Oregonian.
Hey, David. One thing I continue to hear from people is about trouble getting through on the phone. And I say, well, have you tried the Contact Us form? And they're like, the which one, the what? And I'm wondering what kind of messaging people are getting in their letters right now to direct them in that direction, or email. How clear is that to people that that's an option for them?
So we've certainly been encouraging that through our public-facing communication. I've shared before that a lot of our pre-programmed letters are not easy to adjust, and the Contact Us form is a new way for people to reach us that we created to help deal with the onslaught of people that need help during the pandemic. So some of our pre-printed letters, the kind of established ones, do not refer people to the Contact Us form, but we are doing that in some of our other communications to encourage people to do that.
Good, thanks. And a follow-up on that, are there any metrics of how well that's working, how quickly people are getting back to that? At one time, there was a metric around phone wait times. Do you guys keep metrics of how you're responding to requests for information on the Contact Us form?
We don't have the same kind of well-established metrics. We watch it closely, and it frankly varies over time. For instance, prior to late December, we had managed to get through the really large number of people who were contacting us, and we were responding to almost all the inquiries very quickly, most within just a couple of days, and almost all of them within a week. When we saw the end of the CARES Act programs and the new federal legislation, so many people were uncertain about what would happen with their claims, and there were more complications with people shifting from one program to another. So we did see a big increase in the number of people reaching out to us through those forms. We're getting back to the place we want to be. Our goal is to answer those within a few business days. It will take us time to get there, but it's something that we're monitoring very closely. We check in daily as to where we can best shift our resources so that we have people balancing the responding to those inquiries, answering telephone calls, and doing the behind the scenes work, making sure that claims get resolved and benefits go out to people.
Thank you.
Next is Peter Wong with Pamplin Media.
Hi. You mentioned at the top some of your preliminary analyses of women and youth regarding unemployment claims. Do you already have that information on people of color at qualityinfo.org or any other, or the dashboard, or because I don't think you mentioned. You mentioned that they've been hit harder by unemployment, but I didn't recall any statistics that you mentioned.
There is some demographic breakdown available at qualityinfo.org. Some of the data that I was highlighting early was specific to the pandemic unemployment assistance program. Okay. And that data is not there. We are looking at that race and ethnicity breakdown now. We do know from the data that we do have on the regular unemployment program that communities of color tended to be harder hit and have seen a slower recovery as the recession has moved on than other groups of people.
Okay. Also, what's the status of mixed employment, unemployment, MERC, whatever, And is that scheduled to be continued along with the range of other programs in the latest congressional legislation that's slowly making its way through Congress?
So in terms of our implementation of the MEUC program, we are working on that. That was kind of the last of the programs from the Continued Assistance Act that we're implementing. We have all the others done. We knew that this one, although it's a valuable additional payment, everybody getting MEUC is already getting some other benefits. And this is by far the most complex of the programs from the Continued Assistance Program. So we're working on implementing it now. We don't have a timeline yet. Most other states haven't implemented this yet either and are dealing with the same challenges of standing it up. We do hope to have it paid out in March. And as we get more into the work and have a better idea, we'll certainly share hopefully more concrete estimates as we get a better sense. In terms of whether that will be extended, I really hesitate to venture too much because things aren't in their final form until they're actually passed. The continued assistance, the early drafts that we saw didn't have the MEUC program at all. But so far, the draft versions that I've seen extend most of the programs, but have not extended the MEUC program.
Okay, that's my understanding as well. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Next is Kate Davidson, OPB.
Hi, thanks for the question. It's a little bit of a detailed question about people who had been receiving regular UI benefits whose claims are soon to expire. And I think you've said in the past that people can reapply if at some point in the past year they've had income from an employer who contributes payroll taxes to the system, if I'm understanding that right. Would that mean that misclassified employees, people whose employers consider them independent contractors, but OED considers them employees, people who received regular UI, would not be able to successfully file a new claim for UI? Does that make sense?
If I'm understanding you correctly, I'll try to answer it and you can tell me if I address it.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if someone, what we look at is whether the wages should have been reported to us as subject to the unemployment insurance system. So if somebody does work that is covered by the unemployment system and the business misclassifies them and doesn't report it to us, we still look at those claims. And when we determine that it should have been covered, then that counts. And that does count as earnings for the person and they could potentially qualify for a new claim.
Can you describe what happens when the department deems someone to be a misclassified employee and goes ahead and gives them regular unemployment benefits? Is the employer automatically billed in that situation?
There's a couple of different things that happen. The way it's structured in the law, there are kind of two paths. One has to do with the benefits. And when we determine that it is earnings that are covered by the unemployment system and we pay the person benefits, we're also notifying the business, the employer, and they have a right to challenge that conclusion if they think that it's wrong. We also then refer that to our tax area, and they do work with businesses and they'll reach out. Sometimes it's just an innocent misunderstanding where a business honestly thought that a worker was an independent contractor. And in those cases, we do education and outreach and make sure that the taxes are paid and that the business is in compliance going forward. In other cases, we do see situations where businesses are intentionally misclassifying. And in those cases, we, again, pursue collection of the taxes. And there can also be interest and penalties that come to bear in those situations.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next is Lindsay Nadrich with COIN.
Hi, David. I'm wondering if you can give a sense of kind of where the department is at now as far as seeing fraudulent claims versus in the beginning. Has it gotten worse? Has it tapered off at all? And if you could explain why you can't give a dollar amount for how much has been lost, like Washington and California.
Sure. In terms of where it is, it's still a big issue and it kind of fluctuates over time. We're continuing to see large numbers of fraudulent claims being filed and other kind of fraudulent activity. I talked about it not only being directed at the trust fund dollars, but also where unfortunately criminals are trying to get personal information directly from people that are seeking benefits, kind of preying on them even as they're trying to get the benefits they're eligible for. So it is a big problem nationally, and Oregon is not an exception. In terms of not releasing specifics around dollar amounts, we're erring on the side of caution because the risk is so huge. The dollar amounts that have been lost in other states have been massive, and we don't want to do anything that could potentially help criminals understand which attempts we're identifying quickly, which ones are more challenging, and the scale of the claims that we have identified. We have seen in Oregon and other states have seen shifts in how the criminal schemes are attacking systems based on information that is put out publicly. And we just don't feel that it's responsible to add that risk to the public money that we're here to protect, to make sure we can pay it out to people who are eligible for those benefits.
And if I could follow up, so I know months ago, near the beginning of this, I think you had mentioned something about additional identity verification to help prevent fraud. I know other states have partnered with a company called ID Me. Is Oregon working with that company or one similar to take additional steps to prevent fraudulent claims?
Sure. During the course of the pandemic, Oregon has implemented a number of new fraud prevention and detection tools. And we are partnering with one of those companies, yes, to do additional identity verification.
Thank you.
So next is Bill Poehler with the Statesman Journal.
Hey, David. So I have similar questions to what Mike was talking about, the phones. We're here a year into the pandemic, and I'm hearing a lot recently about people having problems with getting through on the phones. What's the department done to try to alleviate that? And are there? I remember at one point you guys had the National Guard working the phones. Are there other things that can be done that are goals? And how do you feel like that the phones are working?
The phones are one of the more difficult problems to fix. And that's not just in Oregon, that also is a symptom nationally. When I talk to my colleagues in other states, what we have done is bolstered the technological system, which at the start of the pandemic was not prepared to receive millions and millions of calls in a month. So the technology part we have worked on, and that has been strengthened a lot. So that capacity is there. What we're seeing and what we have seen is that the biggest challenge is having enough people with enough expertise about all the different programs to be able to answer all the questions. So that's kind of, as Mike was asking about, when we're shifting people between responding to inquiries on the Contact Us form or answering the phone, the people that have the breadth of knowledge to do a lot of that work are the same people that can also be working to do all the work in the computer system, to get claims paying, to process them, to restart claims, to review the income verification information that the federal law requires. So we are still using the National Guard to help add capacity and to spread that work around. One of the main things that we're doing is continuing to do more and more training. We hired hundreds of employees who have done an amazing job of really picking up new and complex programs with very abbreviated training. If you look at where we are now, we're about as far into 2021 as we normally would be for a new employee getting trained on just regular unemployment benefits before we kind of had them out answering the phone calls. We've had to train hundreds of people on programs that didn't exist until the very end of December. So it's still an ongoing challenge, and frankly will be as long as there are rapid changes to the programs and such huge numbers of people needing benefits. But we're continuing to provide additional training so that more and more people are able to answer more and more questions. The Contact Us form is also helping us resolve those issues more quickly. And our goal is to, again, do that so that the people that aren't able to contact us using the Contact Us form or who really need to talk to someone on the phone, to where it's easy for them to get through. Unfortunately, we do think it will take some time before we can get to where we want to be. Our goal in the past was to answer most calls with people on hold for less than 5 minutes, and we want to get back there, but with the historic numbers of people needing help, that will take some time.
So it seems like the phone problems, at least from people I hear from, that it gets worse when there are changes in the programs at the federal level, and you guys have to make changes, like you're kind of like what you're going to be doing with extended benefits to PEUC or PE. I'm not great with those, but it seems like that's when you have the biggest challenges with the phone system. Like a lot of people all of a sudden desperately needed to talk to somebody to get some information. Are there ways that you guys have you noticed that spike, and are there other ways that you guys have found that maybe calling, or when you guys call out to people, that works better than them trying to call you?
We certainly have seen that pattern, and it's understandable. People that are getting benefits and they see their program expiring and there's a change, and they hear in the news that there's a new benefit program, people want certainty and they want to know what's going on. So we do see an increase in calls when that happens. And frankly, our system was originally designed for really good one-on-one customer service, where if people had questions, they would call us and we would quickly answer the call and address the issue. That's not possible when we're handling hundreds of thousands of claims in a week. So we have tried other strategies that have been helpful. That includes some of the outgoing calls, whether it's from our own employees, from the National Guard. Some of the automated calls give information. We've done email updates, and that certainly helps. We still see a lot of people who are understandably concerned about their claim. So we do get lots of people still calling us in whenever there's a change in federal programs or a possible change to their claim. And again, that's something I think everybody can understand how nerve-wracking that must be, to be nearing the end of your claim, or to think that your benefits might stop, or to not know it's coming. So we understand why people want those answers. And we do our best to try to push that information out on our website and through other means. We've also been using social media increasingly to push out more targeted messages about individual scenarios that we think help answer some of the questions and reduce the number of people that need to try to call in.
All right. Well, thanks, David.
Next up is Dick Hughes with the Hueisms. Dick, are you there? So Dick Hughes with the Hueisms. Okay, so we'll check back. Next is Tom Cusack with Oregon Housing Blog.
Hi, David. I'm glad you mentioned this House bill. I listened to the hearing yesterday, and I think what was said during the hearing by the governor's representative was that the charges to the insurance fund for that bill were going to be in the neighborhood of $75 million a year. I look back, and the cost last year for the rest of this year for the prior bill, Senate Bill 1701, was $26 million. So if I add those two numbers together, I get $101 million. Does that sound right? And if so, how long a period is the $75 million supposed to last? How many months and weeks this year is that supposed to cover?
So the projection of about $75 million of cost to the trust fund and about $95 million in benefits actually going out to people is based on an assumption that the bill would be passed soon, and it has an emergency clause, so it would go into effect soon, and that it would run through the end of this year, which is the end date of the temporary change to the law that bill creates. So it would cover most of calendar year 2021. The projection from the House Bill 1701, which was kind of the precursor to this, that this is expanding, the projections do change over time, and Probably the easiest way to explain it is when that bill was going forward, the Continued Assistance Act didn't exist. So for instance, the PUA program was projected to end at the end of December. So sometimes those changes at the federal level to extending other programs also interact with the state law changes and can change the anticipated fiscal impact. So we're always giving the best projections that we have based on the current state of the law when we give those estimates.
So just to follow up on that, I mentioned $101 for the combination of those two bills. What's your best estimate now of what those combined costs would be for this year? And my understanding is both bills are just for this year only, and I'm not quite sure why that is so. But at any rate, is the combined cost of those two bills now projected at more or less than the $101 million that I mentioned?
So I'd have to go back and look at the analysis for the impact for this year for House bills or for 1701 from the second special session last year. We were really giving the projections that we were running were on the specific piece of legislation that the legislature was considering now so that they understood what the anticipated cost would be. And that's the approximately $75 million cost. So I don't have that other figure kind of at hand right now.
And so if I could just follow up one more time, in terms of both bills for some reason run only through the end of this year, what would be the adverse effect other than the obvious financial cost of running or changing the rules permanently to allow what both bills attempt to achieve?
So I think the intent of these bills is really to help out particularly the low wage workers and some of the businesses, restaurants, and others in the hospitality industry, especially that were being hard hit, where they wanted to have people working and they were concerned about the impact of people working part-time. Oregon has a formula to how people's benefits start to be reduced when they go back to work. And I think there was a concern that although it may work well in normal economic circumstances, it didn't fully fit the severity of the pandemic that we're in now. So there are some additional costs when there's a program like this in place because it does allow some additional benefits to go out, which people certainly need right now. And again, these bills are targeted particularly to help the people that have lower weekly benefit amounts. So people that had lower earnings historically and are probably in more need of benefits. There can also be some interactions in terms of how much people get when they aren't working at all and how much they do when they work. In the past, some people have expressed concerns about whether that can create kind of disincentives for people to go back to work. But I think right now, most people are focused in looking at this on helping the low wage workers and doing that as kind of a temporary measure to address the pandemic situation.
All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so next is Keaton Thomas with KATU.
Hey, David, I hope you're well. Thanks for taking the time. You mentioned this earlier. I wanted to follow up with benefit programs potentially expiring again here in March and April. First of all, is there a benefits cliff that we could see for like the third time now since we've been talking about this? If so, then do you have any estimate on the number of Oregonians who might be affected? And what do you want to see from the federal government when it comes to extending or creating any new unemployment programs?
So in terms of what we want to see, ideally, we will see something quickly so that we know what the new programs are and we can get them implemented as quickly as possible, minimize any disruption in benefits. We're already getting pretty close to the end of the benefit programs for most people. And we want it to be simple to implement. And we've shared that with at the national level. So extending just timeframes and the number of weeks available is by far the easiest, and it lets us keep benefits going to people with the minimum of disruption. In terms of there being a benefits cliff, unfortunately, there is. And I don't have the exact numbers in front of me right now of the number of people facing it. It's also a little bit of a different cliff this time. In the past, it was kind of a hard shutoff for the federal programs. This time, mid-March is the last week payable for most people, but for people that get that last week of benefits, they actually have a phase out period. So for some people, it's still a cliff, but it gets delayed a little bit longer where they can receive additional weeks of benefits. If they still have some remaining on their claim, it makes it more difficult to model. And we don't know how many people will be claiming that last week of benefits that then triggers their ability to keep receiving them for a few more weeks.
Fair. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. The other question, totally changing subject, and you have mentioned this before. This is looking ahead. But what sort of task will helping people find jobs again be? After all, you guys are the employment department. Are you guys prepared to work with a big chunk of people finding jobs again?
We are, and we've been doing some of that work all along. There are businesses that are hiring now, and some businesses that are having difficulty finding workers. So there's a lot of different things that we do ourselves, and we work closely with a lot of partners in the workforce system. Sometimes that's matching people with jobs. So we have information on what people's background and skills are, and we match them up with job openings. We provide courses and match people up with training to help them gain skills that they might need. And that could be something from skills about how to get a job, like how to interview or how to apply using online systems or how to have a good resume. Or it could be gaining specific skills to help them get a job, particularly as in any recession, we tend to see a shift where some types of jobs don't come back and people can benefit from retraining. So we have a lot of resources that help people look for those types of retraining. We actually have a very well nationally recognized Trade Act program where there are special programs that help people who are unemployed as a result of international trade. So there's a lot of things that we're doing. I think the extra work that we're doing right now is looking at how we can best adjust all of those tools to serve people virtually, as we're having to do that in the ongoing pandemic.
And just to follow up, is there a cost associated with doing some of that virtual work, or is there a cost associated with, I don't know if you have to have more employees or more staff doing some of this reemployment work right now? Like, are you guys like financially able to do this, or is it going to be an extra cost?
Certainly, we pay our employees to do that work, and we will have a lot more of that work going on. During the peak of people needing benefits, we had almost everyone that normally does that type of work helping people find jobs. When there was the large shutdown in Oregon and there weren't many jobs for people to find, most of those employees really quickly refocused their energies on helping us get benefits to people. So there's kind of a shifting back as the demand changes. And in terms of the cost for the virtual services, it really is a mix. Some of those, there's additional costs. Sometimes it's just us learning different ways to help people. That's something that we work really closely with our workforce partners. Sometimes there's potential additional costs for the people seeking benefits, and we look for grants or other ways that we can help them. All of this is part of our overall budget, though, and we did plan going forward, knowing that in a recession, we shift to from paying benefits to helping people find jobs and to helping businesses find new workers. And there's frequently some retraining in there as well.
Thank you.